For topic 3, we're going to discuss something called absolute value. Okay, so this may be brand new for you. If it is new to you, don't overthink it. Don't make this harder than it is. It's pretty straightforward. So when we're talking about the absolute value of a number, we're just interested in that number's distance from zero. Quite literally, how many units away from zero is that number or that point? Okay. Now, here is the one thing that's maybe a little unique about absolute value. Because distance is non-negative, non-negative just means zero or positive. So since distance is non-negative, so is absolute value, okay? So that means when you find the absolute value of something, your result, with one exception, is always going to be zero or a positive value. So again, this idea of distance not being negative. Distance, no matter what, you've traveled some distance. So you've either traveled down, you've traveled back, but your distance itself is still a positive value. Okay. So for that reason, so is absolute value. Now we use these weird bars right here to represent absolute value. Those are called absolute value bars. And it looks a little weird here because this is the Microsoft equation editor symbol for absolute value. You're supposed to plug a number into that little like dotted line box. But basically, if you take a number and you just put vertical lines on either side of that number, that indicates absolute value. So for example, if we have -6 with absolute value bars around it, that would read the absolute value of -6. And what it's asking, how many units away from zero is -6. So instead of always saying how many units away from zero is -6, we say what is the absolute value of -6. It's saying the same thing. Now we have this little image here, so we have absolute value, and it states very clearly this is just a distance from zero. And then they have kind of two examples on this number line. So make note of where zero is. Zero is really, really important. And then we have, okay, what's the absolute value of -4? Well, -4 is 4 units away from zero. It happens to be to the left, but the fact that it's to the left doesn't really matter to us. We want to know how far is it from zero. It's 4 units away. Second, we have the absolute value of 5. Yes, +5 happens to be to the right of zero, and that is important, but it's not really what we're interested in here. Here, we're interested in the fact that 5 is 5 units away from zero. So again, you're asking yourself, how many units away from zero am I? Doesn't really matter if you're to the left or to the right. How many units away am I? Okay, so let's look at each of these examples. So example 4 just says find each absolute value, and we have 4 parts. So the first one's kind of a little bit of a trick. The absolute value of zero. How far is zero from zero? It's 0 units away. So the absolute value of zero is 0. Okay. Now we have for part B the absolute value of 12. So using a number line, just so you really understand what's happening, we have a number line. We have 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you can see here that 12 is 12 units away from zero. Yes, it happens to be 12 units to the right, but we're just really interested in those 12 units. So the absolute value of 12 is 12. All right. Now, part C, we have the absolute value of -15. Whoops, that's going to be 0 right there. Let me erase that. Is it going to let me erase? For some reason, it won't let me erase right now, but we're going to say this is 0, and then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, -15. So you can see now that -15 is 15 units away from zero. Yes, it happens to be 15 units to the left, but we're just really interested in the fact that it's 15 units away from zero. Whether to the left or to the right, it's still going to be 15 units away. So the absolute value of -15 is 15. Now, this right here is the one exception to the rule. So we know that absolute value is going to be non-negative unless there's a negative in front of the absolute value. Technically, what's happening here, and we haven't talked about multiplying with negatives yet, but technically this is -1 times the absolute value of 8. And that -1 on the outside makes the whole thing negative. So what you need to do is say, okay, what is the absolute value of 8? Well, 8 is 8 units away from zero. But then we want to take that value and multiply it by -1. So the only time you're going to get an absolute value that is negative is if the negative is in front of the absolute value bars. Okay, so there you have it. We'll be able to understand why that negative in front of the negative absolute value of 8 is really like a -1. We'll be able to understand that later. But for now, just know that if you've got a negative in front of your absolute value bars, it makes the whole thing negative. Otherwise, absolute value is non-negative.